Just 1 minute ago, the heart of a WWE superstar almost stopped beating. Backstage in an undisclosed medical wing just outside Monday Night Raw, Roman Reigns, the tribal chief, the head of the table, the man who carried WWE through the pandemic, WrestleMania, and Bloodline warfare, was diagnosed with a life-threatening autoimmune condition. Not a work, not a storyline. A reality so severe that for the first time, Paul Heyman, the most calculating mind in wrestling, was caught on camera visibly breaking down. And beside him, Jacob Fatu, fists clenched, head bowed, whispering through gritted teeth, "This can't be happening. Not now. This is not about championships. This is about survival. And the wrestling world isn't ready for what's coming next." Sources close to WWE's inner circle confirm that Roman Reigns collapsed backstage just minutes after a tense stare-down with Solo Sikoa aired live on Raw. Security footage never meant for public eyes shows Roman exiting the gorilla position, clutching his chest, struggling to breathe. At first, staff thought it was exhaustion. He hadn't been sleeping, he'd missed multiple private appearances, and his recent performance was noticeably slower. But when medics rushed him to a nearby private facility, the truth hit harder than any spear he'd ever delivered in the ring. Roman was sick, very sick. One backstage medic, speaking anonymously, said Roman's skin was cold, his pulse was erratic, and his eyes looked glassy, almost absent. They feared a stroke. Or worse. But the lab results revealed something even more terrifying, a systemic autoimmune disease, possibly lupus or a related rare variant, that had been attacking his joints, liver, and nervous system for months. And nobody saw it coming. Except maybe Paul Heyman. Because Paul's reaction wasn't shock. It was grief. According to a crew member positioned near Roman's dressing room, Heyman had been pacing all day, mumbling to himself, visibly anxious. "It's not just the matches," one witness recalled him saying. "It's the pressure. The burden. The guilt." It started unraveling when the doctor gave Roman the diagnosis. Inside a dimly lit hospital room just blocks away from the Raw arena, Roman was told that his immune system was attacking itself. His white blood cell count was volatile. Inflammation markers were spiking. His body was in rebellion, and had been for some time. The condition wasn't terminal. Not yet. But it was advanced. Aggressive. The kind of diagnosis that forces athletes to retire. The kind that changes a man's identity overnight. That's when Roman, barely coherent, reportedly whispered 4 words that sent a chill through the room. "Don't let him in." At first, staff thought he meant Solo Sikoa, the cousin who had splintered the bloodline and taken half the empire with him. But when pressed, Roman clarified. He was referring to Paul Heyman. The wise man. His most trusted voice. His closest advisor. The man who had stood beside him through every war, but who, in Roman's words, pushed me when I needed rest. Fed the machine when I begged for silence. And yet, Heyman refused to leave. Security footage shows Paul standing outside Roman's room for nearly 40 minutes. Motionless. Unmoving. Just staring at the door. Inside, Jacob Fatu sat alone in a corner, hands pressed against his knees, shaking his head like he was in denial. "Nah. Nah. Not like this," he kept repeating. Because this wasn't just a health scare. This was a reckoning. For years, the world saw Roman Reigns as untouchable. The face of WWE. The tribal chief who demanded acknowledgement. But no one asked what it cost. The endless travel. The backstage politics. The betrayal from family. The pressure to carry a legacy of warriors and bloodlines, all while being hunted by critics, injuries, and expectation. He was the foundation of a dynasty, but he was never allowed to crumble. Until now. Doctors believe the condition had been brewing silently, triggered by stress, compounded by physical trauma, and accelerated by emotional suppression. One physician, off the record, said, his body has been quietly screaming for help for over a year. But he kept pushing. He kept fighting. And now he's facing the fight of his life. The WWE locker room is in shock. Superstars like Kevin Owens and Randy Orton have reportedly sent messages. Sami Zayn, who once fought beside Roman in the Bloodline's most dramatic arc, was seen backstage in tears. And Seth Rollins, Roman's old Shield brother, refused to comment. But when he was handed the news, his hands were shaking too much to finish his interview. And then there's Jacob Fatu, the enforcer. The war dog. He's not known for words. He's known for pain. For punishment. But when the medical report was placed in his hands, he didn't rage. He didn't scream. He wept. "I thought we had time," he reportedly told a trainer. "We were supposed to take it all back. Make the Bloodline ours again. But he was breaking this whole time and I didn't see it." But that's not the end. Because Paul Heyman, after being denied entry, made a quiet call from the hallway. Not to a lawyer. Not to Vince. Not to Triple H. He called Alpha Anoa'i. The godfather of the dynasty. Roman's uncle. The man who raised the Bloodline from the dirt of island streets to the global empire it became. And the call was simple. "It's happening," Paul said. "We need the family." Sources close to the Anoa'i camp say that upon hearing the news, Alpha fell silent. Then told Paul, "Tell the boys to come home. All of them." Within hours, whispers began circulating across the wrestling world. Tonga Loa. Hikuleo. Zilla Fatu. Even legends like Rikishi and the Usos are being contacted. Not for a match. Not for a promo. But for something WWE has never seen before. A Bloodline vigil. One that may be Roman's final curtain call. But before the fans start mourning, there's one more twist. That quote, the chilling whisper Roman gave after collapsing, was just part of the story. Because shortly after being stabilized, Roman reportedly reached for a nurse's pen and wrote a name on a scrap of tissue. Not Paul. Not Jacob. Not even Solo. He wrote Juso. The same man who walked away from him. Who stood defiant at WrestleMania 41 and pinned him clean in the center of the ring. The one cousin who dared break the chain. And now, he's the one Roman asked for. That request alone has ignited chaos. Paul Heyman is said to be devastated. He wants Jay? After everything? After what we built? But Jacob? Jacob understood. He doesn't want peace, Jacob told a medic. He wants closure. Because when your body is shutting down, you stop thinking like a champion. You start thinking like a man. And as doctors prep a long-term treatment plan, immunosuppressants, for drips, fatigue monitoring, one thing is clear, Roman Reigns may never wrestle again. He may never hold gold again. But the legacy he built? The family he tried to hold together? It's breaking, and healing, in real time. One nurse described it perfectly. "I've seen athletes with injuries. I've seen soldiers with trauma. But this? This is like watching a king surrender his sword. And yet, there's still a heartbeat. Roman remains in care. Awake. Fragile. But not gone." A photo leaked earlier today shows him sitting up in bed. No smile. Just eyes, tired, red, but sharp. Watching. Waiting. The caption beneath the leaked image? Just 5 words, "He's still the chief." But behind that strength, there's pain. Because Roman reportedly said to Jacob during a brief moment of lucidity, "You take care of them. All of them. Don't let them burn what we bled to build." And with that, Jacob Fatu stood up, nodded, and walked into the hallway, past Heyman, past cameras, past the world, and punched the wall so hard his knuckles bled. This isn't just a diagnosis. It's a crossroads. Does the bloodline crumble under the weight of the chief's absence? Or does someone step up, not just to lead, but to protect? Right now, all signs point to chaos. Solo Sikoa hasn't responded. Jey Uso is silent. And Paul Heyman is in exile. Denied entry, muttering to himself outside the hospital. But Jacob? He's watching. Waiting. And if Roman doesn't return, it won't be Solo who takes the throne. It'll be the monster who was never supposed to be tamed. Because Roman's words were clear, don't fight for me. Fight because of me. And that fight begins now. The wrestling world may never be the same. And neither will the bloodline. Outside the medical wing, Paul Heyman remained frozen. For nearly 90 minutes, the man who had orchestrated empires, betrayed legends, and crowned champions didn't speak. He sat on a worn leather bench near the fire exit, eyes glassed over, staring at nothing. A security guard offered him water. He refused. A backstage official tried to escort him out. He didn't move. Eventually, a nurse, tired, maybe even annoyed, whispered, "Sir, he asked you not to be let in." And Paul simply nodded. Because no amount of strategy, no amount of loyalty, no amount of power could change that whisper. Don't let him in. Those 4 words haunted him more than any match loss, any courtroom, any betrayal. Because for Paul Heyman, that whisper wasn't rejection. It was retribution. Retribution for every time he told Roman to hold the belt higher when Roman's back was already screaming. Retribution for the press tours, the media manipulation, the blood feuds he helped ignite for ratings. Retribution for turning a man, no, a father, a husband, a son, into a tribal myth until the myth began to suffocate the man underneath. One WWE staffer described it best. This wasn't the head of the table asking for peace. This was Joe. Roman's real name. Joe was asking for a break from all of it. Inside, Jacob Fatu wasn't talking anymore. He was watching Roman sleep. His head was bowed low. His right hand held a cold towel to his face, hiding the tears streaming down. To the world, Jacob Fatu is a savage. A feral dog. A hammer with no handle. But to Roman, Jacob was blood. And blood doesn't walk away, not in sickness, not in betrayal, not even in war. So when the doctors left the room, Jacob stood, walked to Roman's side, and whispered something no camera caught. But a nurse nearby heard it. "You ain't alone, Yus. You hear me? You ain't alone." And Roman, sedated, fragile, nodded. Barely. Word of Roman's condition spread like wildfire. Social media exploded. Hashtag pray for Roman, hashtag bloodline broken, hashtag long live the chief. Fans posted clips of his earliest Shield promos. Others posted montages of him lifting gold. But some posted raw, silent tributes. No music. Just slow fades of Roman walking alone backstage, pain written across his face. Because this wasn't just a wrestling story anymore. It was a human one. And WWE, the machine Roman had fed for a decade, finally went silent. No tweets. No press releases. Just a single image, black and white, posted to WWE's Instagram, Roman's silhouette standing in the entrance tunnel, head down, fists clenched, bathed in light. The caption? "He gave us everything." But here's where it turns. Not all members of the bloodline were quiet. Solo Sikoa posted a cryptic Instagram story, just 3 emojis, a wolf, a broken heart, and a crown. No words. But the meaning? Clear. To some, it was remorse. To others, defiance. Because when Roman collapsed, Solo wasn't there. He hadn't checked in. He hadn't called. And that silence? It's louder than any scream. Sources close to the SmackDown locker room say that when news reached Solo, he didn't flinch. He didn't show emotion. He simply whispered, "I warned him." That quote leaked. And it changed everything. Because now fans weren't just grieving. They were choosing sides. Is Solo the villain who broke the bloodline? Or the realist who saw Roman's decline and stepped away before it consumed them both? Paul Heyman, meanwhile, refused to speak publicly. But insiders reveal he sent a private voice memo to Roman's hospital room via Jacob. The audio file was 1 minute and 12 seconds. It wasn't a promo. It was a confession. Joe. I don't know if you'll hear this. But I need you to know. I failed you. I pushed when I should have paused. I built the kingdom, but I never checked if the king was okay. I told them you were fine. That you were invincible. But I knew. Deep down, I knew you weren't sleeping. That you winced when you got out of cars. That you missed your boys. I knew, and I did nothing. I stood at your side, but I didn't stand up for you. I'm sorry, my tribal chief. I'm sorry, my friend. That memo never aired. Never posted. But Roman reportedly listened to it twice. And after the second time, he asked the nurse, "Is he still outside?" She nodded. Roman whispered, "Let him in." It had been almost 18 hours. When Paul entered the room, he didn't speak. Roman didn't either. They just looked at each other, two men built by performance, now stripped bare. And after a long silence, Roman raised his hand. Paul took it. No tears. No monologue. Just a quiet bond that hadn't broken. Only bent. Jacob stepped out to give them privacy. And when he did, he found himself face to face with someone no one expected to see. JUSO. No fanfare. No music. No SmackDown pop. Just a hoodie, sunglasses, and an Uber receipt. He'd flown in alone. No entourage. No PR. Just a brother, returning home. Jacob didn't say a word. He just stared. Jay stepped forward, jaw tight, eyes damp. Is he? Jacob nodded. Inside. Jay hesitated. You gonna stop me? Jacob shrugged. Nah. You're here now. And just like that, the man who once super-kicked Roman into heartbreak, walked quietly into his room. Roman saw him, and for the first time since his diagnosis, he smiled. Not a smirk. Not the chief's grin. A real, soft, exhausted smile. Jay stepped to the bed. Hey, Yus, he whispered. Told you I'd come back when it mattered. Roman nodded. I knew you would. The two didn't hug. Didn't cry. They just sat. Shoulder to shoulder. As family. As boys who grew into warriors, who forgot they were still just human. And Paul Heyman? He stepped out quietly. Outside, Jacob Fatu was still pacing. He looked at Paul. You good? Paul shook his head. No. But he will be. And that's when Jacob finally said it. The line that changed the tone backstage. If Roman doesn't come back, we rebuild. Not in his shadow. Not with his blood. But with his blessing. Because Roman's collapse didn't just shake the bloodline. It shattered everything. And out of those cracks, something new might grow. Not a faction. Not a storyline. A legacy, rebuilt from pain. As the night turned to morning, a rare silence settled over the WWE Performance Center. No training. No rehearsals. Just stillness. Because sometimes, the loudest moments are the quiet ones. Roman Reigns is still alive. Still fighting. But whether he returns to the ring or not, doesn't matter anymore. Because the man who demanded acknowledgement, just gave us something far more powerful, vulnerability. And as the hours turned to days, something strange happened across the WWE Universe. It got quiet. Not just online. Not just in arenas. In hearts. The tribal war chants faded. The memes paused. Even the trolls took a breath. Because Roman Reigns, the man who never blinked, never wavered, never let the crowd see him stumble, had collapsed. And now, in place of dominance, there was fragility. And in that silence, people remembered something they'd forgotten. He was human. But while the world mourned, while Paul Heyman recited regrets under his breath, and while Jacob Fatu stalked the hallway like a caged lion, one person stayed still. Jay. He never left that hospital room. Every day, nurses brought in an extra chair. Every night, he pulled it closer to the bed. He didn't say much. Sometimes he just whispered old road stories, nights they snuck pizza into the gym, times they drove 10 hours just to make the dark match. But on the third night, Roman looked at him and said something that made Jay's chest clench, "Tell me I didn't ruin everything." And Jay, with a voice so broken it sounded like it belonged to someone else, said, "You gave everything. You didn't ruin it. You saved it." That night, Roman didn't sleep. Neither did Jay. They just sat. No cameras. No titles. No stories. Just two cousins. One blood. Trying to breathe again. But outside that room, pressure was building. Because news doesn't stay buried in WWE. By now, fans knew something was coming. Not just a health update, but a shift. Backstage at SmackDown, Solo Sikoa called a closed-door meeting. Only a handful of people were invited: Hikuleo, Tama Tonga, Zilla Fatu. Not even Paul Heyman was there. And what was discussed? Nobody knows for sure. But someone leaked a quote. And that quote changed the conversation: "If the chief can't lead, we don't wait. We take." The message was clear. There would be no pause. No peace. And for Paul Heyman, now torn between loyalty to a recovering Roman and survival within a splintering empire, it was a line he couldn't ignore. The next morning, Paul did something he hadn't done in years. He made a public statement. Not a WWE promo. Not a kayfabe monologue. A handwritten letter, scanned and posted to WWE's official Twitter. It read, "For over a decade, I've served at the feet of greatness. Roman Reigns is more than a champion. He is the fabric of this generation. But even gods grow tired. And when they do, the world must choose: stand beside them in silence, or exploit their weakness. I choose silence. I choose loyalty. I choose Roman Reigns. And I say this with no ambiguity. Anyone who sees this as their chance to take, has already lost." The tweet broke the internet. Over 2 million shares. Thousands of comments. A civil war among fans. Hashtag I stand with Roman versus hashtag Solo rises. But while fans argued, Roman finally spoke. Not in a press conference. Not on Raw. But in a private voice note, leaked through a friend in the locker room. The voice was gravelly. Tired. Slow. "I built this with my blood. My pain. I bled in silence so they could shine. And now, I see the truth. Maybe they never wanted a leader. Maybe they wanted a martyr. But I'm still here. I'm not dead. Not yet." And then he ended it with 3 words. Acknowledge what's left. The message wasn't a return. It was a warning. Because the kingdom may be falling, but the king isn't done breathing. And that's when everything exploded. Jacob Fatu, silent for 3 days, finally cracked. At an untelevised event in Orlando, he interrupted a training session Solo Sikoa was holding. Solo looked up. Jacob walked straight through a crowd of rookies. No words. Just a stare. And then he said, loud enough for the whole facility to hear, "You speak for him now? You wear his crown while he's still bleeding?" Solo, calm as ever, just smiled. He gave it away. And then Jacob charged. Trainers pulled them apart. Coaches screamed. But something had been unleashed. Because this wasn't about the bloodline anymore. This was about legacy. This was about who protects the throne when the king falls. Back at the clinic, Roman asked the doctors if he could leave his room, just for a few minutes. He wanted air. Not from a window. From the world. So, escorted by 2 nurses and JUSO, he walked slowly into the hospital garden. Not one photographer. No Instagram story. Just breeze. Sky. And that thick, aching question, what happens next? He sat down, palms trembling, and whispered to Jay, if I don't come back, don't let them tear each other apart. And Jay said something simple. Something that felt like a promise written in bone. If you can't fight, I will. If you can't stand, I will. But I ain't doing it for them. I'm doing it for you. Roman nodded. And for the first time in weeks, he closed his eyes in peace. But that peace won't last. Because the news is out now. WWE issued a formal statement. Roman Reigns has been diagnosed with a severe autoimmune condition. Effective immediately, he will step away from in-ring competition. His health and recovery remain our highest priority. No return date. No farewell speech. Just absence. And in WWE, absence is a vacuum. One Solo plans to fill. Sources now confirm Solo Sikoa will open next week's SmackDown with a formal declaration. What that means? No one knows. But backstage whispers hint at a possible coronation. A new era. And Jacob? He's not waiting for an invitation. Word is, he's requested a live mic. No script. No pre-approved talking points. Just him, his fury, and the promise that if Solo makes one wrong move, the bloodline will drown in its own blood. Because Roman Reigns may be down. He may be broken. But his spirit? It's everywhere. In the hallways. In the locker room. In the hearts of those he raised. And the war that's about to begin? It's not about titles. It's about redemption. And this time, it won't end in the ring. It'll end when someone finally answers the question. Who are you when the chief isn't watching? And who dares lead, when his ghost still walks among you? The final act begins not in a ring, but in a hallway. Dim lights. White walls. The soft hum of machines behind doors. Roman Reigns is sitting in a wheelchair, draped in a gray hoodie, eyes shadowed, body thin. He's waiting for test results, again. Waiting to hear if the swelling in his liver has gone down, if the inflammation in his joints has stopped spreading, if he's bought himself another month of breath. But more than anything, he's waiting to see if the family he fought for will still exist when he's strong enough to stand again. Because inside WWE, the empire is cracking. SmackDown begins not with pyro. Not with a theme song. But with Solo Sikoa walking down the ramp in a crown. Not Roman's crown. A new one. Forged from shadows. From silence. From stolen power. He stands in the center of the ring, microphone in hand, and says 3 words, I run this. The crowd erupts. Cheers. Boos. Chants of We Want Roman are drowned out by Solo. Solo, chants orchestrated by the new faction surrounding him, Tama Tonga. Hikuleo. Zilla Fatu. Even new recruits from NXT standing at ringside like soldiers ready to enforce his reign. But Solo isn't smiling. Because behind the steel in his voice is fear. The kind of fear that comes when you take a throne you didn't earn. Because deep down, Solo knows. Roman isn't dead. And ghosts don't rest easy. Backstage, Paul Heyman watches on a monitor, face unreadable. Beside him is Jacob Fatu, head bowed, bouncing slightly on his heels. He's not nervous. He's boiling. And then he turns to Paul and says it, calmly, like it's already done, I'm going out there. Paul grabs his arm. If you do this, Jacob cuts him off. He asked me to protect it. And I will. Seconds later, Jacob's music hits. The arena shakes. Solo's face freezes. Because this isn't a challenge. It's an execution. Jacob storms to the ring like a freight train, microphone already in hand. He doesn't wait for permission. He doesn't wait for crowd silence. He roars into the mic, voice shaking with rage, "You sit on that throne like you built it. But you weren't there when he bled for it. You weren't there when the world laughed at him, hated him, doubted him, and he still showed up. You weren't there when he collapsed." He points directly at the camera. "Roman's in a hospital bed right now because we let this war go too far. And while you out here playing king, he's fighting to live." Solo's smirk fades. The crowd goes quiet. But Jacob's not done. "You think being chief is about holding the mic, raising the belt? It's about carrying the weight of the family when no one else wants to. It's about giving your breath so we could breathe." He steps closer to Solo, nose to nose. "You want this fight? You got it. But when I put you down, it won't be for a title. It'll be for him." The crowd explodes. Tension breaks into chaos. Jacob and Solo brawl in the center of the ring, no referees, no officials. Just fists. Real. Raw. Furious. And as cameras fade to black, WWE issues an emergency statement. Due to unforeseen conflict, SmackDown will continue next week with security protocols in place. No title matches will occur until further notice. But the real headline breaks hours later. A photo leaked to the internet. Roman Reigns, standing unassisted, outside the hospital. No security. No entourage. Just him. And JUSO. Arms over each other's shoulders. Roman looks tired. But he's smiling. And in his hand is a plane ticket. Destination, SmackDown. A new tweet follows. Posted from Roman's account. Just 5 words, "You forgot who I am." The internet implodes. Hashtag Roman returns trends worldwide. But this isn't the return fans expected. There's no fireworks. No announcement. Next week on SmackDown, Solo, flanked by his soldiers, waits in the ring. And the lights go out. No theme song. Just darkness. And one word, Roman's voice, over the speakers, "Enough." The lights come back. Roman standing at the top of the ramp. Hood pulled back. Hair slicked. Eyes blazing. He doesn't run. He walks. Slow. Deliberate. Like gravity itself has shifted. Fans are screaming. Weeping. Paul Heyman stumbles out, tears in his eyes. Jacob Fatu stands behind Roman, arms folded, watching everything like a sentry of vengeance. And as Roman enters the ring, face to face with Solo, the crowd goes dead silent. Roman raises the mic. "This ain't about titles. This ain't about family drama. This is about blood. About the name we carry. And you forgot the weight of that name." Solo tries to interrupt. Roman cuts him off. "You will kneel. Or you will fall." Solo stares. Then slowly drops the mic. And throws a punch. Roman catches it. And the screen goes black. No ending. No resolution. Just war. Because Roman Reigns is back. Not as champion. Not as chief. As a father. A brother. A survivor. And this time, he's not fighting for dominance. He's fighting for legacy. For peace. For the right to breathe again. And if he has to tear down the empire he built to rebuild it from the ashes, so be it. Because the real Roman Reigns didn't die in that hospital. He woke up. And now, everyone in WWE has to answer to the man they tried to replace. 3 days after Roman Reigns' return shook the WWE to its core, silence once again draped the locker room. But this silence wasn't fearful. It was reverent. Because something had shifted, not just on TV, but in the hearts of those behind the curtain. Gone was the myth of invincibility. Gone was the unshakable aura of the tribal chief. What remained was something rarer. Realer. Roman Reigns, the man, had survived. But survival came with a price. Backstage, Roman moved slower now. He didn't bark orders. He didn't hold court. He sat with Jacob Fatu, talking softly, strategizing, not about angles, not about heat, but about healing. Let it burn down if it has to, Roman told him. But don't let it become what broke me. Jacob understood. He had seen power devour people from the inside. But now, he was standing beside someone who had crawled through the fire and come out scarred, but alive. Meanwhile, Solo Sikoa had vanished. No promos. No interviews. Just gone. Insiders say he was given time off. WWE's official statement called it an internal recalibration. But the truth? Roman gave the order. He needs time. Same as I did. Because Roman wasn't here to punish. He was here to prevent. To stop the next brother from falling the same way he did. Paul Heyman, who had lived in Roman's shadow for years, finally found peace and service without manipulation. He no longer whispered in Roman's ear. Now, he listened. And Jey? Jey Uso didn't go back to Raw. He stayed. Not for a storyline. For his cousin. They went on long walks in the morning. Shared old jokes. Sat with silence between them like it was its own kind of language. He's different now, Jey told a trainer. But maybe he had to be. Because Roman's collapse didn't end a dynasty. It redefined it. No more blood for power. No more silence for strength. This new version of the bloodline, whatever it becomes, starts from humility. From truth. From survival. Roman Reigns now trains lightly. Doctors monitor his immune system weekly. He's on medication. On rest protocols. And yet, in his eyes, there's peace. For the first time in years, he doesn't carry the company. He carries only what matters. His children. His wife. His family. The kind that stands with you even when your crown slips. And one night, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Roman stood in front of a quiet performance center, watching young wrestlers file in. He turned to Jacob and said, "If I never wrestle again, I'm okay. But if I do, it won't be for the crowd. It'll be for them." He nodded toward the future, the next generation. The bloodline isn't dead. It's reborn. Not through dominance. Through mercy. And as Roman walked away, the final camera cut not to the ring, not to the titles, but to a message etched on the locker room wall, scrawled in marker by someone who'd watched everything unfold: legends don't survive. Survivors become legends. The legacy of Roman Reigns is no longer about invincibility. It's about resilience. And in that, he may have become more than a tribal chief. He became human. And that's the most powerful thing of all. 3 days after Roman Reigns' return shook the WWE to its very core, there were no championship parades. No celebration segments. No backstage champagne. Just silence. A different kind of silence. The kind that follows a storm and leaves everything standing, but nothing untouched. For years, the bloodline had been a machine, greased with dominance, powered by fear, and aimed at conquest. But now, in the cold fluorescent light of reality, that machine had ground to a halt. And all that remained were people. Roman Reigns. Jacob Fatu. Paul Heyman. Jey Uso. Solo Sikoa. Not characters. Not champions. Just men, each standing in the wreckage of a kingdom they helped build and burn. Roman Reigns no longer stood like a titan. His posture was different now. Slightly hunched, but grounded. The eyes that once stared through challengers were softer now, but still burning. A different fire. Less rage, more clarity. He wasn't hunting anymore. He was watching. He was remembering. And for the first time in years, he was choosing when to speak, and when to let the silence speak for him. That silence hung heavy backstage at the Performance Center, where Roman had begun the earliest stages of his rehabilitation, not just physical, but emotional. He moved slower now. Not from weakness. From awareness. Every step was measured, every breath felt. He'd walk past the same walls he once strode down as the tribal chief, and he'd stop, not to admire the posters or flex for the cameras, but to look at the photos of the people he once called enemies. And wonder how many of them saw the pain in him before he did. Back in the locker room, Jacob Fatu was always nearby. But he didn't shadow Roman like a bodyguard. He walked with him like a brother walking beside someone who just got out of the fire. They didn't talk much. But one afternoon, as Roman struggled through a lightweight session, Jacob finally said what had been boiling inside him since that hospital night. "You kept all of it inside. Every war, every betrayal. You held it all for us." Roman just nodded, sweat dripping down his brow, breath shallow but steady. "I thought I could carry it forever," he said. "Turns out, even the strongest shoulders break." Jacob didn't answer with words. He just stepped forward, picked up the weight Roman had dropped, and said, "Then let's carry it together now." And that's when Roman finally smiled, not the show smile, not the smug grin. A quiet, grateful smile. The kind a man gives when he realizes he doesn't have to be alone anymore. Meanwhile, Paul Heyman had transformed. The man who once orchestrated betrayal with a whisper now sat in production meetings saying almost nothing. He wasn't trying to angle anyone anymore. He wasn't lobbying for Roman's return. He was just watching. He'd watch Roman stretch, slowly, carefully. He'd watch Jacob stalk through the halls, eyes scanning every corner for signs of war. And he'd watch JUSO, Roman's once estranged brother, sit in catering with his headphones in, nodding silently to songs only he could hear. To the world, this might have looked like the end of an era. But Paul saw something else, a rebirth. And in the center of it all was Roman Reigns. But not the Reigns the world knew. Not the tribal chief. Not the universal champion. This was Joe Anoa'i. A father. A man who had been used by the system, by the spotlight, even by those who loved him most. Because they didn't know how else to love him. He had sacrificed years of peace, of joy, of himself, just to carry a family name that was slowly crushing him from within. And now? Now, he was finally learning how to live without the weight. But peace never comes without resistance. Back at SmackDown, Solo Sikoa was unraveling. He had returned after Roman's reappearance, but something had changed. The swagger was still there. The cold stare. The stoic silences. But underneath it all, cracks had formed. His coronation had been interrupted. His throne had been denied. And now, every time he walked to the ring, chants of Roman. Roman, cut through the arena like knives. He wasn't the chief. He was the placeholder. And it was starting to show. Sources say Solo had begun refusing creative meetings. He rejected new merchandise ideas. Even his closest allies, Hikuleo and Zilla, noticed the distance. "He's not here," one insider said. "He's standing in the ring, but mentally, he's watching his empire slip away." And then, it got worse. Because at a closed-door talent meeting in Orlando, Roman Reigns showed up unannounced. No cameras. No press. Just him. A hoodie. A chair. And he sat down in front of everyone, veterans, rookies, agents, and said something that no one expected: "If I wronged you, if I ignored you, if I stepped on you to hold this company up, I'm sorry. I see it now. And I want to do better." The room was frozen. Because it wasn't a promo. It wasn't scripted. It was real. Paul Heyman, standing in the back, wiped tears from his eyes. Jacob Fatu nodded slowly. Jay looked away. And Solo? Solo wasn't there. He didn't come. He couldn't. Because deep down, he knew he wasn't ready to face a Roman Reigns who had nothing to prove, but everything to forgive. The next night, Solo cut a promo live on SmackDown. But this one was different. He wasn't angry. He was scared. He looked into the camera and said, "They want the old Roman back. But that Roman died in a hospital bed. What you got now is a ghost. And ghosts don't lead. They haunt." The crowd booed. But Solo didn't flinch. He dropped the mic, walked out. Left the building. And WWE officials confirmed shortly after, he was taking a leave of absence. No timeline. No comment. Just, gone. Roman's response? He didn't gloat. He didn't respond. He posted a single photo on Instagram. A black and white picture of his family at the beach. His kids building sandcastles. No captions. No filters. Just life. The message was clear. The war was over. The rebuilding had begun. Roman Reigns wouldn't be in the title picture. He wouldn't be in every main event. But he'd be present. He'd be watching. Mentoring. Protecting. Not a king on a throne, but a giant walking among men. A survivor. Because in the end, Roman's story was never about dominance. It was about endurance. About withstanding not just the enemy in front of you, but the one inside of you. The inflammation. The trauma. The weight of silence. He fought it all. And he's still fighting. Every morning he wakes up to new lab results, new meds, new side effects. But he wakes up. And for a man who once believed strength meant never showing pain, that is the greatest transformation of all. Roman Reigns now stands, not above the bloodline, but within it. A part of it. Human. Flawed. Whole. And if he never wrestles again? He'll still be the tribal chief. Not because he held the belt. But because he survived what none of them could see. Because he endured when silence almost killed him. Because he looked death in the face and whispered back, "I am still here." And so as the sun sets over WWE's most chaotic chapter, the man who built the empire sits quietly, watching it rebuild. Not in his image, but in his honor. Days after the confrontation on SmackDown, a strange hush lingered over WWE. Not the kind that comes from silence. The kind that comes from waiting. Waiting for the next fight. The next betrayal. The next decision that could shatter what's left of the family they all once bled to protect. But no fight came. Not yet. Instead, healing began. And it started in the quietest place of all, a dim rehab room in Tampa, Florida, where Roman Reigns sat alone at sunrise, overlooking the coast through a window streaked with morning dew. No monitors. No fans. No belt. Just Roman. Breathing. He hadn't felt this fragile since he was 22, sitting in a hospital bed with leukemia coursing through his blood. But this was different. Because this time, the damage wasn't just in his body. It was in his spirit. Every muscle felt like a reminder of a battle he never asked for. Every joint throbbed like a whisper from the past, "You pushed too hard. You hid the pain too long." He looked down at his hands, calloused, trembling slightly. These were the same hands that held titles, smashed tables, carried the torch. Now they barely held a coffee mug. Jacob Fatu walked in, carrying breakfast, bananas, oatmeal, eggs. Nothing fancy. Just fuel. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. He saw it in Roman's eyes. That quiet war inside. Jacob pulled up a chair, sat down, and just existed. Until finally, Roman broke the silence. "Do you think I was wrong for building it the way I did?" Jacob didn't answer right away. He looked out the window. "Wrong? Nah, use. You did what you had to. We all did. We had to make people see us. Respect us. Fear us." Then he turned back, eyes steady. "But maybe, we forgot to love each other while we did it." Roman didn't reply. His throat tightened. He blinked. One tear rolled down his cheek. Not from pain. From recognition. Because Jacob was right. Somewhere in the storm of dominance and title defenses, of betrayals and broken bloodlines, Roman had lost touch with the one thing that made him fight in the first place: love. Not for the fans. Not for the power. For his brothers. For his legacy. For his name. And he'd buried that love under a mountain of silence. Until now. That afternoon, Roman requested something rare. He asked WWE to organize a private gathering, not on camera, not for show. Just for family. Every living member of the Inoue dynasty was invited. They gathered in a secluded beach house outside Orlando. Rikishi. Jimmy Uso. Jey Uso. Jacob Fatu. Zilla. Afa. Even Solo Sikoa, who hadn't been seen in days, showed up, late, alone, quiet. There were no speeches. No promos. No agendas. Just food, old pictures, and stories. Stories of Uncle Umaga making them all laugh. Stories of Yokozuna flipping furniture just to prove a point. Stories of childhood fights that ended in hugs. And for a moment. Just a moment, they weren't warriors. They were family. Late that night, Roman pulled Solo aside. They walked to the edge of the dock, moonlight on the water, distant sounds of laughter behind them. Neither spoke for a long time. Finally, Solo broke. "I didn't mean to replace you, Yus. I was just trying to keep it from falling." Roman nodded slowly. "You didn't break it. None of you did. It was already breaking, inside me." Solo's voice cracked. "You scared me, man." Roman placed a hand on his shoulder. "I scared myself." They stood there, not as rivals, not as leaders and rebels, but as brothers. Trying to forgive each other for the pain neither of them knew how to carry alone. That night, Solo didn't sleep in a hotel. He slept on the floor of the same room as Jey and Jimmy, just like they used to when they were boys. Because forgiveness isn't about a statement. It's about coming home. Meanwhile, WWE was scrambling. The story had taken on a life of its own. Not because of scripted returns or surprise attacks. But because of raw truth. The audience saw Roman in a different light now. Not the tribal chief who demanded acknowledgement. But the man who collapsed when no one was looking. The man who whispered, "Don't let him in," not out of hatred, but out of fear. Fear of being seen as weak. Fear of letting his armor fall. And now, he was done hiding. Roman returned to the performance center the following week, not to wrestle, but to speak. To a small group of talent. No cameras. He stood in the ring, microphone in hand, and for the first time, his voice shook. "I thought I had to be perfect. I thought I had to carry this place alone. I thought showing pain meant I'd lose everything." He paused, breath tight. "But pain saved me. Because it forced me to stop. To listen. To heal." Tears welled in a few eyes around the ring. Some clapped. Most just listened. "If you're here trying to be invincible, let me save you the trouble. You're not. None of us are. And that's okay." He stepped down. Left the mic in the ring. Walked out with his hoodie pulled over his head, not in shame, but in peace. The room was silent. Then one person, an NXT rookie, whispered, "That's the strongest thing I've ever seen." Because it was. Roman Reigns wasn't just back. He was free. And now, he wasn't building an empire. He was building something bigger. A family that survives. A legacy that listens. And a future that doesn't forget the cost of silence. 2 weeks passed. And in that time, the WWE Universe adjusted to a new rhythm. One without Roman Reigns at the center. There were no weekly declarations from the Bloodline. No throne. No title matches involving the Chief. And yet, Roman's shadow still stretched over everything. Because absence, when wrapped in reverence, becomes myth. But Roman wasn't trying to be a myth anymore. He was trying to be whole. And that healing began not with another war, but with the smallest of moments, one the cameras never caught. A moment inside the gym at the Performance Center. Roman was stretching near the corner when a new trainee, barely 20, nervous, wide-eyed, approached him with hesitation. "Sir," the kid said, voice trembling, "I just wanted to say. I watched you for years. You made me believe I didn't have to be loud to be strong." Roman looked up. Smiled faintly. And said, "That's because strength isn't noise. It's knowing when to stop fighting." The kid nodded, eyes shining. That one sentence would stay with him forever. And it would ripple throughout the building. Because Roman had stopped chasing glory. And started becoming something rarer, a mentor. A mirror. A man who had survived the weight of the crown and now walked among his people, wounded, yes. But awake. Meanwhile, backstage plans were shifting. Paul Heyman, once the architect of Roman's dominance, had started operating like a different kind of strategist. Quietly, behind the scenes, he was coordinating a legacy project with WWE management. Not a comeback. A tribute. Not just to Roman, but to the lineage. A full-scale WWE Network docuseries titled, The Bloodline, Built from Pain. Roman wasn't the face of it. All of them were. Alpha. Rikishi. The Usos. Jacob. Zilla. Umaga. Yokozuna. It would chronicle how this family went from South Pacific fields to sports entertainment royalty. And Roman would narrate the final episode. Not in the voice of a champion, but in the voice of a man who finally understood that legacy isn't what you hold up, it's what you leave behind. Still, questions remained. Would Roman wrestle again? Would he return at WrestleMania? Would he chase one more title? Even Paul didn't know. Roman had grown quieter since the Bloodline family retreat. He didn't talk strategy. He didn't map out angles. He talked about sunrises. He talked about his sons. He talked about his wife's voice being the only thing that could quiet the noise in his head. And more than once, he said it out loud, "I'm not done. But I'm done being owned by it." That sentence carried more weight than any championship belt ever could. Because Roman wasn't retiring. He was reclaiming. Reclaiming his identity. Reclaiming his choices. Reclaiming the right to say, "No, not today," without guilt. Meanwhile, Jacob Fatu was evolving too. Once the silent enforcer, he had begun stepping into a new role, not as a warlord, but as a bridge. In a surprise appearance on NXT, Jacob delivered a heartfelt promo to a group of young Samoan talent, unannounced, unfiltered. He spoke of his brotherhood with Roman, of his own rage, and of how it took watching the strongest man he knew break to understand what loyalty actually meant. "They think we're savages," Jacob said. "But what they don't know is, we've already survived the wilderness." That speech went viral. Fans weren't just seeing Jacob as Roman's shadow anymore. They were seeing him as a voice. A protector of the old ways. A symbol of a new era that honors legacy without being trapped by it. Back at the clinic, Roman had one final meeting with his lead physician. The doctor looked at him carefully. "You're stable," he said. But you'll always need to be careful. Stress, exhaustion, they'll hit harder. Recovery will be slower. Roman smiled. Good, he said. Maybe that'll stop me from saving everyone but myself. That same week, WWE offered Roman an open mic on the upcoming Raw. No script. Just him. He declined. Instead, he recorded a short video, 1 minute long. He sat at home, hair pulled back, beard thicker, eyes tired, but clear. And he said this ain't a retirement speech. This ain't a return speech either. It's a reminder that I was never just your champion. I was a son. A brother. A father. A survivor. He paused. I gave you 10 years of dominance. Now I'm gonna give myself 10 years of peace. The video ended. No outro. No fanfare. Just a man walking out of frame. The response? Explosive. Support groups. Podcasts. Interviews. Fans crying. Superstars sharing stories of Roman helping them backstage, standing up for them during contract disputes, checking on them after matches. Because now that he wasn't performing for the world finally saw who he really was. But the story wasn't over. Because on the eve of WrestleMania, WWE made one final announcement. At WrestleMania, there will be no match, but there will be a moment. The lights dimmed. The arena hushed. And from the back, walked Roman Reigns. No gear. No pyro. Just a simple black suit. He stood in the center of the ring. The crowd chanted his name, louder than ever before. But he held up a hand. Not to hush them. To acknowledge them. He took the mic and said, I don't need to defend anything. I already won. I won the day I got back up. The camera zoomed in as he looked into the lens. To every kid watching, you don't have to be perfect. You just have to keep going. The arena exploded. Roman dropped the mic. Raised a closed fist. And the screen faded to black. But just before the final logo appeared, one last whisper echoed through the stadium speakers. Believe that.